She was the most powerful woman in the company. He was the invisible man who cleaned her floors. When their worlds collided, no one expected what happened next. Before we dive into this unforgettable love story, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring tale like this. An unlikely encounter. The hum of the office air conditioning was the only sound left in the towering skyscraper of Verdant Industries. Most employees had long since gone home, trading spreadsheets and conference calls for dinners and late-night TV. But on the 42nd floor, a single light still burned. Victoria Langford, the company's formidable CEO, sat at her glass desk, her sharp blue eyes scanning a contract that could make or break the next quarter. Her blazer was draped over the back of her chair, her heels kicked off under the desk. She rubbed her temples, the weight of the company pressing down on her. Success had cost her relationships, sleep, the ability to turn off her mind for even a moment. Down the hall, the soft squeak of rubber soles against polished marble echoed. Ethan Cole moved through the empty offices like a ghost, his mop gliding over floors in smooth, practiced strokes. He was used to being unseen, just another part of the building's nightly routine. At 32, he had learned long ago that people rarely looked at janitors, much less spoke to them. He paused outside Victoria's office, watching her for a moment through the half-open door. He'd seen her before, of course. Everyone in the company knew who she was. But up close, she looked different. Less like the untouchable executive from the annual reports and more like a person, a tired, frustrated person. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't supposed to interrupt, wasn't supposed to engage. But something about the way she clenched her jaw, the way her fingers tapped restlessly against the desk, made him step forward. He knocked lightly on the doorframe. Victoria looked up, startled. Her gaze flickered over him, his worn work boots, his company-issued uniform, the name tag that read Ethan Maintenance. For a second, she seemed about to dismiss him, to return to her papers without a word. But then she sighed. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said, his voice quiet but steady. "It's after midnight. You should head home." Victoria arched an eyebrow. "I have work to finish." He nodded toward the empty coffee cup at her elbow. "You've had enough of that to keep you awake for days." A faint, tired smile tugged at her lips. Occupational hazard. Ethan stepped inside, picking up the cup before it could leave a ring on the polished wood. "You're going to burn out if you keep this up." Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying him. Most people didn't talk to her like this. Not without fear, not without an agenda. But there was no sycophancy in his tone, no hidden motive, just an observation. "You're not supposed to tell the CEO what to do," she said, though there was no real bite in it. Ethan shrugged. "Someone should." For the first time in weeks, Victoria laughed. It was a short, surprised sound, but it loosened something in her chest. Then, as if remembering herself, she straightened. "What's your name?" "Ethan Cole." She nodded, committing it to memory. "Well, Ethan Cole, I appreciate the concern, but this merger isn't going to negotiate itself." He didn't push further, just gave a small nod and turned to leave. But as he reached the door, Victoria spoke again. "How long have you worked here?" 5 years. She frowned. "And you're still on night shift?" Another shrug. "Day crew's full." Victoria opened her mouth to say what, she wasn't sure, but before she could, a noise from the hallway made them both turn. Mark, one of the security guards, stood there, his arms crossed. His eyes darted between them, lingering on Ethan with suspicion. "Everything all right, Ms. Langford?" Victoria's posture shifted instantly, her CEO mask sliding back into place. "Fine, Mark. Just finishing up." Mark nodded, but his gaze stayed on Ethan a beat too long. "Building's supposed to be clear by 1 a.m. Maintenance needs to stick to their schedule." Ethan didn't react, just dipped his head. "I'll be done soon." The moment was over. The strange, unexpected ease between them vanished beneath the weight of hierarchy and expectation. Victoria watched as Ethan left, his shoulders straight, his steps unhurried. She should have gone back to her papers. But instead, she found herself staring at the door long after he'd disappeared. And when she finally packed up to leave, She found something tucked into the pocket of her blazer. A folded note. "You deserved a rest too." She didn't know why it made her chest ache, but for the first time in years, she went home before sunrise. Whispers in the hallway. Victoria didn't sleep. The note stayed in her pocket, folded and refolded, its edges softening from the friction of her fingers. She told herself it was nothing, just a kind gesture from a man who didn't know his place. But the words lingered in her mind, stubborn and unshakable. You deserved a rest too. When had anyone last said that to her? She arrived at the office before dawn, the city still draped in shadows. The elevator ride up to the 42nd floor felt longer than usual, the silence pressing against her ears. When the door slid open, she half expected to see Ethan there, pushing his cart, nodding at her like they shared some unspoken secret. But the hallway was empty. Victoria strode to her office, her heels clicking against the marble. She had a full day ahead, board meetings, investor calls, decisions that would ripple through the company for years. She needed to focus. Yet every time she glanced at the clock, she found herself calculating how many hours until nightfall. Ethan had been awake since 4 a.m., long before his shift started. He'd tossed and turned, replaying the conversation in his head. He shouldn't have said anything, shouldn't have left that note. But something about Victoria Langford, the way exhaustion clung to her like a second skin, had gotten under his ribs. He arrived at Verdant Industries just as the sun was rising, the early shift already in full swing. The day crew barely glanced at him as he clocked in, their conversations buzzing around him like static. Heard the so was here past midnight again, one of the accountants muttered near the coffee machine. Wouldn't be surprised if she sleeps at her desk. Another laughed. Ethan kept his head down, but his grip tightened around the mop handle. By noon, the whispers had spread. Victoria sat through 3 meetings, her expression unreadable, while her executives traded glances across the table. She knew what they were thinking, knew how this worked. A woman in her position couldn't afford even the slightest crack in her armor. And yet, Victoria, Richard Crane, the company's CFO, leaned against her office doorway, his tailored suit and slick-back hair a picture of calculated charm. "Got a minute?" She didn't, but she nodded anyway. Richard strolled in, shutting the door behind him. "Rumor is you had a late-night chat with one of the janitors." Victoria didn't flinch. And nothing. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just curious. You don't usually fraternize with the help. The word help curled off his tongue like an insult. Victoria leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled. "Is there a point to this, Richard?" He shrugged. "Just looking out for you. People talk. You know how it is." Oh, she knew. Knew exactly how quickly a story could twist. How a single moment of humanity could be spun into weakness. "Noted," she said coolly. Richard lingered for a beat, then turned to leave. But at the door, he paused. "By the way, the board's getting antsy about the Hartford deal. They're wondering if you're distracted." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Victoria waited until the door clicked shut before exhaling. Ethan was cleaning the 30th floor conference room when he heard it. 2 junior executives, oblivious to his presence, gossiped over their lattes. Heard she was talking to him, like actually talking. No way. Victoria Langford doesn't talk to anyone below VP. Well, apparently she makes exceptions for guys with brooms. Laughter, sharp and mocking. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he kept scrubbing the table, his movements methodical. He was used to this, used to being invisible, used to being the punchline. But then, wonder if he's good with his hands. The words slithered across the room, ugly and insinuating. Ethan froze. For 5 years, he'd kept his head down, done his job, stayed silent. But this, the door swung open before he could react. Mia Chun, Richard's assistant, stood there, her tablet clutched to her chest. Her eyes darted from the executives to Ethan, her expression tightening. "Am I interrupting something?" Her voice was ice. The executives paled. "No, we were just..." Leaving, Mia finished for them. "Now!" They scrambled out, their laughter dying in their throats. Mia waited until they were gone before turning to Ethan. "You okay?" The question surprised him. No one ever asked. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Thanks." Mia hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Be careful. Richard's got his eye on you." Ethan frowned. "Why?" But Mia just shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Just watch your back." Then she was gone, leaving Ethan alone with the weight of her warning. Victoria spent the afternoon buried in paperwork, but her thoughts kept circling back to Ethan, to the way he'd looked at her, not with fear or ambition, but with something dangerously close to understanding. It unsettled her. She was halfway through signing off on a new policy when her phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "Board emergency meeting tomorrow. 8 a.m. sharp." No explanation. No context. Victoria's stomach dropped. She knew a power play when she saw one. That night, the office was quieter than usual. Ethan worked methodically, his mind racing. Mia's warning gnawed at him. What did Richard want with the janitor? He was mopping near the executive suites when a sound made him pause. Muffled voices from behind Richard's closed door. Ethan knew he should walk away. Knew better than to eavesdrop. But then he heard Victoria's name. And then, just need to make sure the numbers look bad before the vote. Richard's voice, low and smug. Once the board sees she's losing control, they'll push her out. Ethan's blood ran cold. A second voice, one he didn't recognize, chuckled, "And when the stock tanks, we'll buy low. By the time it rebounds, Victoria will be gone, and I'll be the one holding the reins." Ethan backed away, his pulse roaring in his ears. This wasn't just gossip. This was sabotage. He had to warn her. But how? And more importantly, would she even believe him? The choice. Ethan's hand shook as he pushed his cleaning cart down the hall, the wheels squeaking in the silence of the empty office. His mind raced with fragments of Richard's conversation. Make the numbers look bad. Push her out. Buy low. It was corporate sabotage. Plain and simple. But who would believe a janitor over the CFO? He thought about Mia's warning. Richard's got his eye on you. Was this why? Had someone seen him talking to Victoria? Did Richard suspect he'd overheard? Ethan stopped outside Victoria's office. The light was off, the door locked. Of course she wasn't here. It was past midnight, and even workaholics had to sleep sometime. But he couldn't wait until morning. By then it might be too late. He pulled out his phone, hesitating. He didn't have her number. He could leave another note. But what if she didn't see it in time? Then he remembered the parking garage. Victoria always parked in the same reserved spot, level B, near the executive elevator. If he timed it right, he might catch her when she arrived in the morning. Victoria barely slept. The text about the emergency board meeting gnawed at her. Richard was up to something, and she needed to be ready. She arrived at the garage just after 6 a.m., the sky still dark. Her heels clicked against the concrete as she walked toward the elevator, her mind already spinning through strategies. Then she saw him. Ethan stood near the elevator doors, his hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders tense. He looked like he hadn't slept. When he spotted her, he straightened, his expression unreadable. Victoria slowed. "Ethan?" He glanced around, as if checking for witnesses, then stepped closer. "We need to talk." Her instincts flared. This was inappropriate, reckless even. But something in his voice stopped her from walking away. "Here?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "Somewhere no one can hear us." They took the service elevator up to the 42nd floor, the hum of machinery, the only sound between them. Victoria's pulse thrummed in her throat. She shouldn't be doing this. Shouldn't be sneaking around with an employee. Shouldn't be trusting a man she barely knew. But she'd learned to trust her gut. And right now, her gut said listen. She led him into a small, windowless conference room, the kind reserved for sensitive meetings. The second the door closed, Ethan spoke. "Richard's planning something. Something bad." Victoria crossed her arms. "Explain." Ethan told her everything. The whispers in the hallway, Mia's warning, the conversation he'd overheard. When he got to the part about Richard manipulating the numbers, Victoria's stomach dropped. "You're sure about this?" I heard him say it. Ethan's jaw tightened. He's going to tank the stock on purpose. So the board turns on you. Victoria turned away, her mind racing. It made sense. Richard had been gunning for her seat for years. But to risk the company's stability just to oust her, that was next-level betrayal. She faced Ethan again. Why are you telling me this? The question hung between them. Ethan met her gaze. Because it's wrong. No flattery. No agenda. Just 3 simple words. Victoria exhaled. She believed him. But belief wasn't enough. She needed proof. Mia Chin was typing furiously at her desk when Victoria appeared in her doorway. We need to talk. Mia's fingers froze mid-keystroke. She glanced around. Richard's office was empty, but the walls had ears. Not here. They stepped into the women's restroom. Victoria checking under the stalls to ensure they were alone. Did you know? Victoria demanded. Mia's throat bobbed. I suspected. And you didn't say anything? I tried. Mia's voice dropped to a whisper. I warned Ethan because I knew he'd tell you. If I came to you directly, Richard would know it was me. Victoria studied her, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled. Mia had always been loyal, but this was more than loyalty. This was fear. Do you have proof? Victoria asked. Mia hesitated, then nodded. I have audio from the meeting yesterday. Victoria's breath caught. You recorded him? Enough to sink him. Mia pulled a flash drive from her blazer pocket. But if he finds out... Victoria took the drive, her fingers brushing Mia's. He won't. The boardroom was packed when Victoria arrived at 7:55 a.m. Richard sat at the head of the table, smirking as she walked in. Victoria, he said smoothly, glad you could join us. She didn't smile. Let's get started. Richard cleared his throat. As you all know, we've called this meeting to discuss the concerning dip in Q3 projections. It seems leadership may have overextended. Murmurs rippled through the room. Victoria kept her face neutral. Before we continue, she said, I'd like to share something. She plugged the flash drive into the projector. Richard's voice filled the room. Just need to make sure the numbers look bad before the vote. The blood drained from Richard's face. Victoria leaned forward, her voice deadly calm. Any questions? Silence. Then chaos. Ethan was cleaning the lobby when elevator doors opened and security escorted Richard out, his face purple with rage. You'll regret this. Richard snarled at no one in particular. I built this company. His eyes locked onto Ethan. Recognition flashed. Then fury. You, he spat. Ethan didn't flinch. Richard lunged, but security yanked him back. This isn't over, he screamed as they dragged him out. Ethan watched him go, his heart pounding. Then his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. My office. Now. VL. He exhaled. It wasn't over. But maybe, just maybe it was a beginning. Power shift. The elevator ride up to Victoria's office felt longer than usual. Ethan's reflection stared back at him from the polished doors, his work-roughened hands, the faint stain of cleaning solution on his sleeve. He looked exactly like what he was. A man who didn't belong in the executive suites. Yet here he was. The door slid open to reveal Mia waiting in the hallway, her arms crossed. She looked exhausted but triumphant. He's gone, she said without preamble. Board voted unanimously to terminate him after hearing the recording. Ethan exhaled. And Victoria? Mia's lips quirked. She's waiting for you. Victoria stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office, the morning light painting the city in gold. She didn't turn when Ethan entered, just gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit. He remained standing. I should probably. Sit, Ethan. This time he obeyed. Victoria finally turned, and he was startled to see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her blouse was slightly wrinkled. The invincible soul looked human. You took a big risk, she said, coming to me. Ethan met her gaze. You believe me. A beat of silence. Then Victoria reached into her desk and slid a folder across the polished surface. Open it. Inside was an employment contract, but not for a janitor. Ethan Cole. Title: Director of Operations. Ethan's breath caught. This is a mistake. Why? Because Richard thought you were just a help? Victoria's voice sharpened. You uncovered conspiracy that could have tanked this company. You have a business degree from Northwestern that you've been hiding behind a mop for 5 years. His head snapped up. How did you? I looked. She leaned forward. The question is, why didn't you use it? The truth sat heavy in his throat. After blowing a whistle on his last employer, after the blacklisting and the bankruptcy, he'd stopped believing systems could change. Until now. Victoria stood abruptly. Board meeting in 10 minutes. You're coming. The whispers started the moment they entered the boardroom together. 20 pairs of eyes tracked Ethan as he took the seat beside Victoria, a chair usually reserved for the CFO. The air thickened with unasked questions. Victoria didn't acknowledge the tension. As you've all heard, we've had some personnel changes. A gray-haired board member cleared his throat. Victoria, surely we should discuss interim leadership before bringing in... Ethan Cole, she interrupted, formerly of Sterling and Graves, where he uncovered their accounting fraud, Northwestern MBA. And as of this morning, she slid copies of the contract across the table. Our new director of operations. The room erupted. You can't be serious. He's a janitor. Victoria's voice cut through the chaos like steel. He's the reason you still have jobs. Ethan sat perfectly still, absorbing the shock waves. He'd been invisible here for years. Now every eye burned into him. Some curious, most hostile. Then a voice cut through the noise. I'd like to hear him speak. All heads turned to Eleanor West, the board's eldest member and largest shareholder. Her sharp gaze pinned Ethan. Well, the room held its breath. Ethan straightened his shoulders and began to talk. 2 hours later, the vote passed by a slim margin. As the board members filed out, several paused to shake Ethan's hand. Eleanor West was last, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman in her 70s. Don't make me regret this, she murmured. Then they were alone, Victoria and Ethan in the silent boardroom, the weight of what just happened settling between them. Victoria finally broke the silence. You're good at this. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. They hate me. Some of them, she agreed, but they respect results. She hesitated, then added quietly, I meant what I said earlier, about why you hid. The unspoken question hung in the air. Who hurt you? Ethan studied the city skyline through the windows, the world he'd just been invited to reclaim. I'll have my resignation on your desk by... Don't. Victoria's hand brushed his sleeve, fleeting but deliberate. Stay. And for the first time in years, Ethan wanted to... What would you do if you were given a second chance? Let us know in the comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary choices.